Creating graphic symbols and motion tweens in Adobe Animate. You're going to download the 4 stages of the walk cycle, and you're going to unlock the background and delete the white background around the figures on all 4 files using the magic wand tool. And then you're going to save each file as a Photoshop document. Don't rename them, just save them as a Photoshop document. Then you're going to do File, Scripts, Load Images into Stack. Just like you did with the bouncing ball animation, you're going to be loading all 4 of the figures from the walk cycle into an image stack. So I'm just very quickly deleting the background from all 4 of the files. I'm saving each one as a Photoshop file, and now I'm going to load the images into a stack. I'm just skipping through all 4 files because you already know how to do that. And now File, Scripts, Load Images into Stack, and then you're going to hit Browse, and you're going to select all 4 of the images you just saved. You're going to load them into a stack, and then you're going to have to, once they're in that little window and loaded into a stack, you're going to have to select all 4 files again and then hit OK. Once the stack loads, which should be very quickly since there's only 4 of them, you're going to have to use the Move tool to move all the figures on top of each other. Go to each layer and just slide all the figures so that they're just directly on top of each other, which is what I'm doing now. And once you have the images all lined up, I would try and line them up by their feet as closely as possible, so it almost looks like the person's walking in place. Once all 4 layers are lined up, you're going to go down to your timeline, and this is just to test it out. You're going to create a frame animation, and then you are going to go over to the right and click Make Frames from Layers. So I made the frame animation, and now go over to those little lines on the right, just above the timeline, and you're going to click Make Frames from Layers, and that will give you your frames, and you'll have just a little very quick animation. Just test it out, and then you're going to save the entire file as a walk cycle image stack. It's very important that you name it something that you can find later that's very distinct. So please save it as walk cycle image stack, and it's just going to be saved as a Photoshop file. And at this point you can close the file, and you're actually going to be now opening up Adobe Animate. So once you get into Adobe Animate, you're going to have to create a full HD file, but you're going to have to change the frame rate to 24 frames per second. The default is 30, so you're going to have to change it to 24 frames per second. FPS is frames per second. And you're going to then go File, Import to Library, and you're going to find your image stack that you created before and import it to your library. If you can't see the library, you just go to the top and you go Window and check off Library so you can see your library. And now you're going to check off all 4 layers to make sure they're visible, and you're going to convert layers to keyframes. That's not a default. You have to change that, convert layers to keyframes. And then you're going to click Import. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the top and you're going to click Insert, and you're going to click New Symbol. And you are going to be creating a graphic symbol, and I want you to call it Walk Cycle. Now find that symbol inside your library, double click to open it, and that puts you inside the symbol. And inside the symbol, it has its own timeline. So you're going to go to the folder that has the 4 frames in it, the image stack folder, and you're going to open that folder up, and you're going to drag the top layer of the image stack onto your timeline. And now I want you to go to the timeline, and I want you to right click copy frame, and then I want you to right click in the space next to it and paste the frame. Every single frame you create in your animation is going to be duplicated twice. That makes for a much smoother movement cycle if every frame appears on the timeline twice in a row. So now you need to take the second frame in your animation, and you need to drag it onto the timeline. But in order to position it in the right place, you're going to have to turn the onion skinning on. So the onion skinning it's right below the timeline. It just looks like 2 little sheets of paper. It basically makes the paper transparent. And it'll enable you to position the next frame correctly on the timeline so that you can see it. So what I'm doing is I copied the frame, I pasted the frame, and then I right click insert new keyframe, insert blank keyframe, and I drag the next image on to the timeline. Then I right click copy frame, right click paste frame, and then insert blank keyframe, and then drag the next one onto the timeline. And with the onion skinning, the paper becomes see-through, and you can see exactly where to position it. See how it kind of appears blue, and that means you know exactly where to position the next frame. You're going to be positioning each figure so it's directly on top of the figure that came before it. So it looks like a person walking in place. Now, when you're done and you have done all 4 frames and you've copied and pasted each frame so that it appears twice on the timeline, you should have 8 frames in a row on your timeline, and you have now created an animated graphic symbol. So once you're done and you have all 4 frames on your timeline, and all 4 layers on your timeline for a total of 8 frames, it's now time for you to exit the symbol. So what you're going to do is you go to the top of the page, there's a little back arrow that will bring you back to scene 1. So you go to the top of the page, you go to hit the little back arrow, you're going to go to scene 1, and you'll now have a blank timeline. Here I'm just testing out my little graphic symbol. That's how it looks when I play it. And now I'm going to exit the symbol and go back to my timeline. So I go to the top, there's a little back arrow that brings me back to scene 1. And let me just get the little stage so I can see it. And now I'm going to drag my little symbol, my walk cycle symbol that I just created, just to the left of the white stage. So it's like it's off stage, ready to walk onto the stage. So I just take that graphic symbol and I'm going to drag it just to the left of the timeline. And there we go. I'm going to drag it just to the left of the timeline. And now I'm going to go down to the timeline. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create what's called a motion tween. And then I'm going to go down to the timeline. I'm just going to drag that timeline out to about 3 seconds. The default is about 1 second, but I want to make the person walk nice and slowly across the stage. So I'm dragging out the timeline to about 3 seconds. And then I'm going to take my little guy, and since I'm creating a motion tween, I'm going to just drag my graphic symbol across the stage, and I'm not going to let go of the mouse till I get just off the stage to the right. Okay, so my person's going to walk from all the way to the left, all the way to the right. You're going to see a little dotted line. That's his motion path. So you can adjust the motion path by just dragging the cursor. See, I made it curved. And let's see. Let me just test out my little motion tween, see how it looks. And you can see the person's walking up the little hill and walking down over and over again. So that's my motion tween. Now, unfortunately, the default background would be black, so I wouldn't be able to see my person at all if I exported the video right now. So I'm going to just create a green screen background. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to right-click on the layer and insert a new layer. And then I'm going to drag the new layer underneath my person layer. So I've got a blank layer underneath. So insert layer and then drag it down so it's on the bottom. And then I'm going to go File, Import, Import to Stage. So instead of importing to the library, I'm going to import to the stage. And I'm going to import my green screen color, which was one of the project files which I gave you for this assignment. And let's see, import. And so now it's imported to the stage. The entire stage should turn green. And now when I play my little movie, the person is walking across the stage. It's taking about 3 seconds, and he's in front of a green background. So now it's time to export my little movie. So I'm going to do File, Export, Export Video. Oh, first I want to save my file. I'm gonna name it walk cycle animation or green screen walk cycle, whatever. Anyway, once I've saved the project, I'm going to go File, Export, Export Video. And I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to go to the Adobe Media Encoder, and there's a little tiny green arrow in the upper right-hand corner. And I'm going to click on that green arrow, and that's what exports my video as an MP4. And the MP4 is what you are going to upload to Google Classroom to show that you know how to create a motion tween and an animated graphic symbol, and that you understand what a walk cycle is.